fun.
I was gonna say, it brings some levity.
We're
still good. Let's see what time is it.
We have a few seconds.
All right, it's 9:30. I'm gonna hit the button. Everybody ready?
Why not?
All right, we're going. No. And live. We're live.
Are we though? You know, let's just do this while we're doing the intro. We'll cut over and have a little Brady Bunch gallery of rogues gallery of amazingness. All right, we have some guests today. Obviously, there's not gonna be a lot of content from Todd and I, which people are probably refreshed and happy about. So Doug, Todd's over that way. Brian's there. Steve's that way, right down there. So, hey, Brian, Steve, you want to do? Steve, I'll cue you up first. You want to do a quick intro as to who you are and why you're here today?
Yeah, hey everyone. Thanks, Todd, and
Doug.
Yeah, you know, whoever.
you are. We met
occasionally.
Thanks for having me back again. Happy to provide some updates to everyone about what's been working on Yammer. I'm a program manager and a customer advocacy for the Yammer engineering
Yep,
team.
and Steve's been a huge, came from the Yammer customer community back in the old days and has been with Yammer ever since from the beginning. And you've been on a frequent, recurring person to kind of keep us in line with where we're going. Mr. Cowie, you were a promised guest. Steve's a surprise guest, but you were a committed guest in regards to and so what are you going to cover today?
So I'm going to be some Power Platform stuff. So I have a kind of solution that I've been putting together that I'm trying to evangelize with a bunch of different customers around working inside of a well-governed environment. I wanted to have a very strategic approach around provisioning things like Teams and Sharepoint and Power Platform requests in a way that causes less work from an administration perspective and more consolidation. There's check-ins before things happen. So wanted to show some of the different patterns and practices that I basically throw it in there to be able to really bring this to life in various ways that allows you to also kind of modularize it out. It'll be fun.
So for the control-minded amongst you who like command and control over provisioning and settings and all sorts of other stuff, we talked a little about the API stuff a couple weeks ago, and then you hit me up and said, hey, here's some expressions of that work. And I was like, examples are way better than, talking. So, but we're going to start off with Yammer today. So I'm going to hit the cut over button. And Steve, your content should be on the board. So the floor is yours. We'll heckle you as needed.
Sounds good. I know you will. So this is our blog post about something that recently came out for April that we've introduced. We can link to this, so you can reference it later on. A couple things. As you might hard at work, really hard to make sure to get the new Yammer experience in the hands of all of our customers. We've been evolving the rollout so that have the ability to toggle back and forth the classic Yammer experience, the new Yammer. We are in the process rolling out the new Yammer as the default experience for all of our customers. So we're continuing to make great progress on that later on this calendar year. We'll take away the option to toggle back. We're making great strides. We're making great strides. People really benefiting from the new Yammer refreshed experience. So we've also been taking a lot of need to iterate as we go along. So please continue to let us know how it's in general. We've been getting great feedback on the new Yammer experience.
One quick interruption, Todd. Are you watching the chat? If anybody's talking about echo, can someone let me know?
Yes, they are actually.
Okay.
They are actually.
Too much feedback. One moment while I correct the aforementioned problem. So we're just going to go ahead and get some live corrections on that issue. One moment. All of a sudden I realized there were too many bars bumping simultaneously on the audio mixer. So let's go ahead and try it one more time. Steve, back to you.
All right. We've also taken the new Yammer and applied it into some of the Yammer email notifications that you already get today. So hopefully you're already experiencing some of that. But we're also taking that new Yammer experience and applying it to the Yammer Discovery and Digest emails that you get. So those Discovery and Digest emails will no longer be just these flat experiences, but they'll instead be a very interactive experience where you can react to the post right in the body of the Outlook message. You can comment on it right from the body of the Outlook message. So we really continue to make sure that you have the ability to interact directly with live Yammer content wherever you might be doing your work. Just in the lead up to this, in the pre-show, we were talking about the Teams integration as well. Perhaps you know about that. The Communities app also provides you a nice capability to access all of your Yammer communities and Yammer content right from within the Teams shell as well. So we want to make sure to meet your users and your employees where they're at. I'm not going to go through all these things here. Like I said, we'll provide the link for you to reference this blog post for you to consume some of this content. I'll cover some of the highlights here. We're going to also start to inject SharePoint news into the discovery feed for Yammer. The discovery feed continues to be one of the core elements that help people, find new information. In this case, we think injecting a lot of the news and information that you're creating within SharePoint into the feed will also be beneficial content for your employees.
I'm going to pause you right there. I think that one's an important one to highlight. Because we got a whole bunch of people who've, Brian and I have been evangelizing the value of SharePoint News for a long time. And internally, we chose that, like in Todd's org, where I used to be a part of in the MTC, we chose to dynamically publish news pages because their discoverability, their taxonomy, their ability to be, easily shared around. And this really helps reinforce that news as that shareable content resource through communities. But the user experience is much better than the old kind of, I don't know how to say it's dead link view of the sharing, right? Like you're really kind of bringing that live page forward, right? Which is, I think that's something I think people should really pay attention to. Like that's how you get, because maybe you had a news story that was here, and now you want to get that news story into a community. This represents that bridgehead, which I think is super important.
Well, you really want to amplify it, right, Doug? It's one thing to have it sit within SharePoint and hope people come to it, but now we're providing a mechanism to really amplify it through the discovery.
And I tried using the API. I did a show about a while back where I was just basically using the Yammer API to dump the link to the news story in and recreate my own digest. Now I don't have to do that. Like this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
the other thing we've improved upon here is now you get this nice thumbnail, you get the nice link summary to it. So your hack unfortunately didn't provide that nice engaging content.
This is why I immediately went, wait, pause, right? Like that one's really worth highlighting, for the SharePoint minded amongst you.
Yeah. I actually want to show this in real life here, at least show a demo of what the new insights are that we've provided. So this has been a common thing that we hear from a lot of our customers. They want better data about what's happening within the communities that they're running. You might know within the new Yammer, if you go to About, you see a little snapshot of what's happening within your community. When you drill into it, you can see a bit more detail. So we've really revamped some of the analytics and data that you get for your community. In this case, what you see here in the Overview tab, you see a trend line of the activity within the community over time. So you can start to see where people were, where there might be peaks in activity. Maybe you were running a campaign. You want to see where those peaks were. Activity around active members or active non-members. So if it's a public community and you have people coming in and out and contributing, you can see what that non-member activity is. We're also providing new data around questions and answers. So many of our customers are using Yammer for these support-driven communities, IT support, HR support. So now you can see what the question and answer activity looks like within your community. What percentage of questions have a best answer marked? What's the status of any new questions? I mean, Doug and Todd and Brian, you can imagine when somebody asks a question in a community, there's nothing less engaging than not getting any answer to it or not getting some interaction with it, right?
Yep.
So we want to provide some telemetry for our community owners to know, hey, there are new questions, and here's the status of those questions.
So to give you a practical internal example on that one, like the value we're seeing, we had some people saying us, like internally when we're releasing things, like there's not reference architecture patterns people can find, but it turns out that's a very common question, like updates when new products come along. So we found by using the question feature to tie it to like those kind of things, people are not only able to find it, they're able to go back and revisit it and revalidate it and refresh it, rather than just the discussion threads, which sort of scroll off in time. Does that make sense? Like it's been super powerful for some of the real like business challenges we have inside of Microsoft, because now I run these global program roles about these different people coming together, which is essentially a community activity. So I found that to be like that's where we're pushing things, right? So.
And wait till you see what we're doing with Viva Topics. I don't know if we'll get time to share that today, but we think that there's a lot of benefit in accruing, with a lot of benefit in taking a lot of the tacit knowledge that gets built up in a Yammer network, a Yammer community, and accruing it to Viva Topics. That's pretty exciting stuff that we're going to be doing there. Live event analytics. So for those of our customers that are running live events, Yammer live events, we're going to provide this dashboard. So now you'll see the total number of events, what the reach of those events have been. I can drill down into a specific event to see activity around what happened in that event, how many, the total views before, during, and after the event. What was the average time people spent in the event? We get this time series of activity or viewership during the event. So I can see people started to drop out right around the 1 hour, 20-minute mark. What location, what department, what platform did they use to access the event? I can drill down and see specific engagement data for the event. There are a peak in the number of comments close to the 1 hour mark. What were some of the top conversations or unanswered questions during the live event? So really insightful data to help people understand what's happening in the context of their live events. The last thing that we're delivering with our new insights, we have many of our Corp Comms folks doing announcements in Yammer. Maybe their leaders are using Yammer. They want to understand a little bit about how those posts are performing, how those threads are performing. So we're releasing a capability called Conversation Insights. So for a given thread, you'll be able to view the insights for that particular thread. I can see the total number of people that have seen it, the total views of the thread. How has this conversation trended over a period of time? What department did they access it from? Did they access it from Yammer, Yammer Web, mobile, Outlook, or one of our Teams integrations? I can drill down and see more engagement data. So reactions, top comments, and shares. So especially this piece around the discovery platform. One of our big goals is to make sure that I was actually talking to a customer. They said one of the benefits they found out of Yammer recently is this omni-channel approach, being able to do a message in Yammer and have it dispersed across Outlook, across Teams, and meeting people again where they're at. So having some telemetry here about how people are consuming this particular thread, where they're consuming it, can be really insightful to folks in corporate communications.
So I'm only going to pause you there for one brief moment. We used to run this corporate communications workshop about 2 years ago, where we would teach people how to bring all these pieces together to achieve the telemetry you just showed as an encapsulated product. Like we used to say, like, here's how you can do it, and we used to say to people, like, by putting in like link services, like link shortening services, and you can get telemetry off of clicks or whatever. Like, but you had to sort of, we were almost like, okay, go get this GitHub project, implement it, and then put your corp comms into here and whatever, and then your Yammer post can be viewed like this, whatever it is. So you've just kind of fixed that problem by allowing visibility across the common estates of email, Yammer, and other sources, where the message telemetry of read, no matter the client. The read telemetry comes back, which is so critical for corp comms people. Am I reaching my audience?
Yep.
Right? Like,
exactly.
Because remember we used to have the clutter feature, and everyone got mad at us and told us to turn it off because they're like, well, our executives' emails are going into clutter, and we used to say, well, that's not the problem. The problem is that nobody was reading the messages, right? I mean, that's the real problem. And this really tells you, how do I hit people where they're with what matters? What kind of messages matter? This is so important. So, all right, proceed, but I'm just endorsing all this. Like, it just really represents a huge, like, it's not just a feature. Like, you don't have to go do all this construction work. You can just go do it.
Yeah. One last thing, and then I want to leave Brian his 16 minutes and 43 seconds that he needs. We're also introducing a capability for folks to do a post on behalf of, or a delegation feature. Post on behalf of. Internally we call this feature POBO. So here you see I'm logged in as Megan, but Megan has also been bestowed capability to post as other people because Nestor or Patty or Johanna have given her rights to post on their behalf. She hasn't stolen it. They've actually given her this capability. So for those of you that have maybe executives that are a bit shy or maybe they're not ready to start using Yammer, you can, I sort of call this leadership engagement training wheels, if you will, for those leaders that need a little help. Or maybe you have a shared corporate communications account that you have amongst your corporate communications staff and you want to distribute the ability to post as that shared account. You could use this post on behalf of capability. So you'll notice I can do a post in here. I can say, please come to the town hall. And I can also do it as an announcement if Patty, in this case, is an administrator. So I can actually do it as an announcement, which will provide that distributed reach that I talked about earlier. Or I can just do it as a regular post as well, which I'm going to do. And I'll post it. You'll notice it actually gets posted as Patty. We don't put any other labels around it. So, for all intents and purposes, Santa Claus exists in a lot of people's worlds. So that's a capability that we're getting ready to release probably in the June timeframe. We're doing a private preview with some customers now, but that's been a long-awaited capability from a lot of our customers.
That's awesome. So would you come back and do the Viva thing with us?
Yeah, happy to.
That is a super common request for people to kind of understand how does this progression work, right? So there's kind of this current state of communities and how we've evolved, and now where are we headed? I feel like that would be super helpful.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited about how Yammer will show up in places like Viva Connections specifically and Viva Topics. That's again a big part of our strategy going forward is to make sure that Yammer is available where people are at, like Viva Connections and like Viva Topics.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Over to you, Brian.
Cool.
Mr. Cowie.
Yeah. So once again, kind of peeling back into the kind of govern command and control center.
Yeah, by the way, and now for something completely different. We're going to go from Yammer communities to governed provisioning demonstrations of API services. The cold water shock there is going to be heavy, but these are two super fascinating topics for our audience, right? One's where are we going with communities, where are we headed? Now it's all right, here's tactical examples of using the API service produce governed environments, right? So here's what's super exciting about the reason there's both these things, there's all these finished capabilities, and there's the command and control surface. So I feel like that really represents the pillars of our show, right? Here's these amazing finished composed services and the command, control, and provisioning. So Mr. Cowie?
Yeah, thanks. So I think that one thing that would be very interesting is to see the engagement intelligence like what Steve was able to show and how many people dropped, right, as soon as I was able to start talking here. But anyway, so what we're even looking at right now is a Power App that I've created. At the end of the day, my scenario is I want to have a lockdown environment, right? I don't want everybody and their mother creating a team, creating a SharePoint site, spinning up a Power Platform environment or needing a license, if you will. So wanting to be able to have a very structured way in for people to be able to request it, but as well as to provision these in a modular way. Now, I'm doing these inside of a Canvas app, so right, if I come out of here, you're going to see a bunch of various, screens and things and such, right, inside of here. But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is have a formalized nature of it. So, if I go into, say, I want to request a team, and I'm trying to formulate this in a way to really follow, hey, the first thing that we need here is what is the information right on the individual team. So if I even just put, Office/Friday. Now, one thing that I also wanted to make sure is, hey, does this thing exist or does it not? So I am actually kicking off a flow with that button to basically check to see if the team already exists based off of the site names and all that kind of stuff that happen behind the scenes. Now, as well, being able to actually choose predefined templates to be able to provision these teams based off of that you actually have identified inside of the team's admin center. So, right, being able to spin these up with a certain set of channels and tabs and apps and all that kind of good stuff that you have the availability to basically push out there. I'm going to choose project at least for this one. And then all sorts of other things, right? Like visibility of public or private, what your data classifications are, right? So that you can stamp those in there together. And then if you want to be able to enable for external users to be able to come in or not, Because a lot of the times, right, you want to be able to lock this down for internal, but you want to have some selected teams, right, to be able to be accessible
Brian,
for external use.
I'm just going to pause you right there. So you could implement whatever governance rules, language checking, naming conventions.
Yeah.
Like if you wanted to check a learning management system before the person was allowed to do external, say have they taken the external sharing class, you could do that and say you can't do it until you've passed the class. Like this is where you can put in your governance rules, right? But we're not turning off self-service creation. We're just allowing it with governance.
Yeah. So, and like when I even do this here, right? Like I'm saying, hey, wait a second. From my rule, like if you're going to allow external people, it kind of can't be highly confidential. Like, you know, that's something that shouldn't be able to be in place, right? And, you know, having the kind of required, non-required pieces, as you can see, I can't even move forward until, you know, I put in a demo fund business reason. I don't necessarily need to have my description in there. But then one of the nice things that I'm doing, right, is I'm just then flipping over to, say, the membership area and, you know, requiring that there needs to be at least 2 owners. So if I put like myself and good old, you know, Nick Fury from the multiverse, you know, I automatically could say, even though Steve Rogers and Captain America is a little bit different now, or I put, you know, Natasha because she has a movie coming up, right? One of the things that I'm having nicely here is not only being able to specify, okay, who are the owners going to be, who are the members going to be, we can also provision them inside of the actual team during that aspect. You know, and then the whole kind of CYA piece of it, right? Like, in order to actually do this, we own your first child, you know, kind of a deal. So by just even doing this, one thing that I'm doing is I have all of these components modeled inside of the Dataverse for having a request. And if it's a Teams request or a SharePoint request and whatever, and I'm just redirecting you to write your my request, and of course I get everything approved. But you know, being able to do the normal kind of filtering and sorting and all that kind of stuff, as well as a timer to refresh it, if you will. But really, what I'm ending up doing now, based off of all of the different request types, is I'm basically kicking off my flows in the backend to basically manage all of the approvals, right, that would be necessary, as well as the actual provisioning states. So one thing that we're going to end up seeing here is basically this is my main kind of tech request approval initiation piece that, of course, sets a bunch of different variables and then goes down the different swim lanes, if it's a team, if it's a SharePoint site, so that we could have different approval requirements. So like the Teams team, right, I'm basically binding that to an AD group, right, for who those individuals are. And then the Teams team likes to actually approve said requests inside of Teams, shockingly enough. So going ahead and posting that adaptive card over there, you know, to be able to actually, you know, go through for any sort of approvals and whatnot. So if I jump over here and actually let me see if you'll see my Teams admins is already bolded out because there's something new inside, you know, pushing via the adaptive card framework, right, with approvals, all of the kind of information that goes along with it, along with the owners, members, just so that you can see. So this is a great demo. Fantastic. So just going to go ahead, submit that for the actual approval piece to be able to continue on its way. So what will end up happening, and why some of this is also important, is I've modularized out the way in which then the Teams team can handle their own provisioning. So it doesn't have to be in this ginormous component, right? So in this case, I'm kicking off a child flow for that provisioning team. Now, in this case, the Teams team decided, you know what, I want to go ahead and leverage this through things like Azure Functions. So being able to leverage, you know, Azure Key Vault for client ID, secret, all of that kind of good stuff, and then literally calling an Azure function through an HTTP request, passing along all the way the information that I've basically gathered in. So, you know, the Azure function is nothing more than a set of a bunch of these various components, right? So calling, you know, basically getting, you know, my HTTP request, getting user information, but basically kind of going through and here's my stamps on like the various templates, if you will, and really mocking up what are ending up being the Graph API calls to be able to make this thing happen. So if it's creating the individual team, sleeping because I'm tired, to make sure that that team is already created, then doing things like setting the actual classification itself, then updating the settings for the actual group, the guest command settings itself, as well as other things like even though I'm leveraging the beta endpoint for this one, being able to add all of those users in bulk if they're basically owners or if they're members. But once again, the Teams team can literally do this completely abstracted from the other way. Right?
So that's the line right there. So I'm going to pause it. So you showed this Compose Power App using, the Dataverse Common Data Services, where the business objects represent the request or going through approval and validation, right? Then it hits the point where it's time for provisioning, and now it's game on for whatever that group wants to leverage from a provisioning surface area. In this case, you're like, well, this is a person who understands Azure Functions, so we've wired those two things up together, right? In order to have that. But if somebody else chose a different provisioning vehicle, you can just sock it.
Such as on the SharePoint side, I basically have a bunch of Azure Automation runbooks where I can basically create new sites. I modularize those things out for applying site designs and permissions and new hub sites and all that kind of stuff. And of course, all of the feedback loop, right? Stuff that comes on back so that, the Power Admins being able to send on back like, hey, my team is already there. It's already created with all the associated owners and members. So that if I actually even come back, we're going to see, right, that my Office Flash Friday is already created. Now, the actual, template application actually happens asynchronously as well. So by the time we're done here, we should be able to see all of the other channels basically being added. But if I even come into here, right, and I decide to go ahead, like Nick's already in here, Steve, Natasha, like they're already members and owners in their particular ways. We can also see that, in general, when I come in here, right, like it's already marked as that highly confidential, like I can't add the external users because it's locked down from that sort of perspective, right? So I'm going to quickly go ahead and do the exact same thing from a SharePoint perspective, just so that you can see how those different pieces at least come together. So once again, similar sort of an aspect. And I'm just going to say OFF just to make that one go along, and having a lot more, right, individual kind of, once again, governance or ruling inside of here. Like if it's a communication site, I can make it as a new hub site or not, but maybe not from a template or a team site sort of perspective. Same thing for the whole users and visibility aspects. And the same thing from the owners and so we're going to make Steve here a good old owner if I don't need to do members, visitors, but visitors only show up for communication sites and so on and so forth. But what I'm also doing for those templates is I'm storing the site designs that are potential for those individual templates so that I can dynamically spin those up inside of the SharePoint provisioning flow. So like this is that one where I'm creating the site through Azure Automation. I'm getting the output, which is the actual URL of said SharePoint site, and then literally linking through every single site design that's tied to the template, as well as then adding the associated permissions, checking to see if I want to generate a new hub site or join an existing hub site, and then of course flip on back. So already, right, I basically have my approval once again, right, that can basically happen inside of here. So let's just go ahead and approve the actual SharePoint site request, once again with similar sort of information. That's all well and done. Final sets of approval. So that's literally just going to go ahead and start spinning up, those Azure Automation runbooks themselves. So if we were to look over here at the jobs, so it's basically using a centralized, right, input mechanism for the approvals, for all of that command and control. And then literally just starting to spin these things up and spit all of that information back, leveraging also the same kind of key vault and components that are at least inside of there. And of course, once that's all well and done, it'll send me an email with a link to my site and be able to go along my merry way. So the thing that I like about this is after you get that set up, the administration post governance is literally defining if you need to have new rules or adding new templates. Right? Like you're then out of the business of actually having to do provisioning, and you're still allowing people to go through the self-service components, and everything is created based off of your governance guidelines.
So now what you did right there, you could have abstracted that and done it with a service management tool like ServiceNow if you want to for the front end request process. Right?
Yeah.
You could have still used those functions to dip into your governance rules there. So the way you've composed this modularly, like you've got the composed solution on the front side for managing the requests and validating your business rules. It goes in, you get your audit, track, and trace. You can or you could just trigger notifications and finished service tickets into ServiceNow at the end of your GUI, right? Like you do whatever you want to for service channel integration, or you can leverage your flavor of choice for these provisioning frameworks. Like it's all modular.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Can I ask a question? So is this available somewhere as we head into our, like, are you?
It will be for sure. So
Yeah.
I've actually been creating all the things that I can inside of Power, inside of an actual solution that I will throw up on Git and make sure that you guys know and where that's basically going to be available. But basically you can see, like, I have all of my tables and my choices and all of my cloud flows and all of that definition inside of a solution that you can throw into there. Now, conversely, being able to like ship through things like Azure DevOps for provisioning the Power Platform environments or the Azure functions or the Azure automation scripts, right? Like, you're going to have to do all of those kind of individually. But yeah, my plan is for all this stuff to literally be a more cohesive solution that you can then pick and choose, right, in the different kind of components that you want to be able to have.
Mr. Kidda? Is that an example of the API surface we talked about the other day? Where, like, hypothetically, one could build out like a provisioning service that then pre-populated all this stuff and everything else, and all the stuff we did in the beginning was all like, I think, yeah, there you go.
I would say, yes, this is a good example of that.
Now then, you combine that with...
It's very thorough, yes.
Yeah, you combine that with the stuff we've shown before around, like, dynamic teams, news content generation, right? And then you tie that together with Steve's stuff around community. And you can... This is why we always say it's a GUI, an API, and a Power something, right? Like, you can bring this together to compose on behalf of and to really build these amazing tooling and community standards around all this stuff, which I think is just crazy.
Absolutely. Very good example. Bravo.
Well, we're at the 11 o'clock.
That's perfect timing.
Which is really pretty good. And I know Brian's was 75 miles an hour, but we wanted to say, what's an example? Because I had a couple people on Twitter DM me and said, okay, well, those APIs, like, where do we get more advanced examples? I'm like, and then Brian's like, hey, Doug, I want to show you something. I'm like, well, you should come on. So once this one gets published, I don't know, Brian, next month or so maybe for you to get it out there,
Yeah.
you think? So so follow Mr. Coway. He'll publish that out there. And then Steve, follow on. We'll have you come back and talk a little Viva, right? Which is a whole lot of people are talking about it. And I think demystifying that as much as possible would be amazing.
Yeah, a lot of interest there on Viva for sure.
Mr. Kidda, you got anything else? Otherwise, we can call it a wrap and end on time at 11 o'clock. Thank you, Steve and Brian, for coming and sharing the content with our audience. Appreciate it as always. Otherwise,
great stuff.
Everybody have a great weekend. And
I have nothing but well wishes and goodwill for everyone who is listening.
Yeah.